In a quiet village surrounded by dusty roads and wide open fields, Amina was known for her gentle heart. She was not born into wealth. Her house was small, with cracked walls and a tin roof that rattled when the wind blew. But inside that house lived warmth, laughter, kindness. Amina woke before sunrise every day. She helped her mother arrange vegetables into neat baskets. She carried water from the well. She cared for her younger siblings like they were her own children. No one ever heard her complain. People often said, "That girl will make a good wife one day." But Amina did not dream of simply being someone's wife. She dreamed of being loved, truly loved, chosen, protected. That dream began to take shape during the village harvest festival. The entire village gathered in the square. Drums echoed through the night. Lanterns swayed in the warm air. The scent of roasted corn and fried dough filled the streets. Amina was helping her mother sell oranges when her basket slipped from her hands. Bright fruit rolled across the ground, drawing laughter from nearby children. Before she could bend down, a pair of strong hands began picking them up. She looked up and saw him. Kamal. He had a confident smile, the kind that made people feel at ease. His clothes were simple, but he wore them with pride. His eyes held something deeper than charm. They held hunger, not for food but for something bigger than the village. "You dropped something," he said gently, handing her the basket. Their fingers brushed for a second. That second changed everything. After that night, Kamal began visiting the market more often. He found reasons to pass by her stall. Sometimes he bought vegetables he did not need. Sometimes he simply stood nearby and talked about small things, the weather, the crops, village news. But soon his words grew larger. He spoke about expanding his carpentry work, about traveling to the city to learn new skills, about building something that would make his family proud. "I don't want to live small," he once told her as they stood near the river at sunset. "I want to give my wife a life where she never has to worry." The way he said "my wife" made her heart race. Kamal did not rush her. He spoke to her father respectfully. He brought small gifts to her mother. He showed the village that his intentions were serious. When their families agreed to the marriage, it felt like a blessing from heaven. The wedding day was filled with music and celebration. Women sang songs about loyalty and devotion. Elders prayed for a strong union. The air was heavy with joy. Amina wore a simple white dress, but she felt like a queen. When Kamal looked at her, his eyes were full of pride. "You are my greatest gift," he whispered. From that day forward, they were inseparable. Their home was small, but it felt alive. They cooked together. They laughed over burnt rice. They stayed awake at night talking about their future. Kamal was protective. If anyone spoke harshly to her in the market, he was quick to defend her. He walked beside her with quiet strength, making her feel safe. But behind his loving nature was something else. Restlessness. Money was tight. Some weeks, his carpentry shop barely earned enough to cover rent. Other men teased him for dreaming too big. "You should be grateful for what you have," they told him. But Kamal wanted more. At night, while Amina slept beside him, he would stare at the ceiling. "I can do better," he would whisper to himself. He began taking bigger jobs. Riskier ones. Borrowing small amounts of money to buy better tools. Promising quick returns. Amina noticed the worry in his face. "Are we okay?" she once asked softly. He smiled and kissed her forehead. "We are more than okay. Trust me." And she did. She trusted his dreams. She trusted his ambition. She trusted the way he held her hand like he would never let go. Some evenings they would sit outside under the stars. He would draw plans in the dirt with a stick. Designs for a bigger workshop, ideas for furniture he wanted to build. One day, he would say, "We'll move to a bigger house. We'll have children running in the yard. You won't have to work so hard." Amina would rest her head on his shoulder, feeling safe. They were young. In love. Full of hope. They believed love was strong enough to fight any storm. But even in their happiest moments, there was a quiet tension in the air, like the calm before heavy rain. Kamal's dreams were growing faster than his reality. And sometimes big dreams demand dangerous choices. Still, on those peaceful nights, none of that mattered. They were two hearts beating together, planning a future that felt certain. A future they believed no one, and nothing, could ever take away. Little did they know that future was already beginning to slip through their fingers. The night Kamal disappeared did not begin with fear. It began with hope. Amina was stirring a pot of soup over the small stove when Kamal rushed into the house, his face bright with excitement. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were alive. "Amina," he said, almost breathless. "This is it." She turned to him, confused. "What is it?" he explained quickly. A man from the city had sent word through a trader. The man needed custom furniture for a new shop. A large order. More money than Kamal had ever earned at once. He wants to meet tonight, Kamal said. He says he leaves at dawn. If I miss this chance, someone else will take it. Amina felt something twist in her stomach. Tonight? She asked softly. It's already dark. Kamal paced the small room, running his fingers through his hair. Big chances don't wait for morning. There was a strange urgency in his voice. Not just excitement, desperation. He knelt in front of her and took her hands. If this works, everything changes. No more struggling. No more debts. I promise you, Amina, this is the breakthrough I've been waiting for. She studied his face. She saw the dream. She saw the pressure. She saw the need to prove himself. Where will you meet him? She asked. Near the old highway. Just outside the village. Her heart beat faster. That's far. I'll be back before sunrise, he assured her. You won't even notice I'm gone. He stood up, grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Amina followed him outside. The night air felt colder than usual. The moon was hidden behind clouds. She held his arm for a second longer than usual. Be careful, she whispered. He smiled, touched her cheek gently and said the words she would replay in her mind for years. Trust me. I'll return before morning. Then he walked into the darkness. Amina stood there until his figure disappeared down the dusty road. Inside she tried to distract herself. She washed dishes. She folded clothes. She swept the floor twice. But the house felt too quiet. Every sound made her jump. A dog barked in the distance. A cart rolled past. The wind pushed against the door. Midnight came. She lit another lamp. He said before morning, she reminded herself. By 2 o'clock her chest felt tight. She stepped outside and looked down the road. It was empty. By 3 o'clock, fear began to creep in. Maybe the meeting is taking longer. Maybe they are negotiating. Maybe he is walking back slowly. She sat by the door, refusing to lie down. The sky slowly changed color. Dark blue turned into soft gray. Morning came. But Kamal did not. At first she stayed calm. Perhaps he slept at someone's house. Perhaps he missed the last cart back. When the sun rose fully, she walked to the trader who had delivered the message. The trader looked confused. What meeting? He asked. Her heart skipped. The man from the city, she said. The furniture order. The trader shook his head slowly. No one asked me to send such a message. Amina felt the ground shift beneath her feet. That afternoon she told his family. By evening the entire village knew. Men gathered with lanterns. They searched the road near the highway. They checked ditches, bushes, nearby farms. Nothing. The next day they searched again. Nothing. By the third day whispers began. He ran away. He borrowed money and fled. I heard he was in trouble. Maybe he found another woman in the city. Each word felt like poison. Amina refused to cry in public. My husband would never leave me, she said firmly. But at night, alone in their bed, she pressed her face into his pillow and breathed in the fading scent of him. A week passed. Then 2. Still no message. No body. No sign. His tools remained in the corner of the house. His clothes hung on their hooks. His unfinished wooden chair sat outside the workshop. It was as if he had stepped out for a moment and forgotten to return. After 1 month, fear changed shape. It was no longer sharp panic. It became a heavy weight in her chest. Was he hurt somewhere? Was he alive? Did he choose to leave? She replayed their last conversation again and again. Did she miss something in his voice? Was there fear hidden behind his smile? One evening, as the sun set in orange streaks across the sky, an older woman from the village approached her. My child, the woman said gently, sometimes men leave when the burden becomes too heavy. Amina shook her head. No, she whispered. But doubt had already planted its seed. Still, every night she left the door slightly open. She placed a lamp near the entrance so he could find his way home. She would sit quietly, staring at the road, waiting for footsteps, waiting for his voice calling her name, waiting for the promise he made. I'll return before morning. But the mornings kept coming, and he never did. And as she stared at the empty doorway once again, a terrifying question finally rose in her heart. What if he never will? The first year after Kamal disappeared felt like walking through thick fog. At first, the village still searched. Men gathered in small groups. They traveled to nearby towns asking questions. They checked hospitals and police stations. But as weeks turned into months, hope slowly began to fade. People stopped searching. But Amina did not stop waiting. Money became the first enemy. Without Kamal, the carpentry shop closed. Orders were cancelled. Debts he had quietly taken began to surface. Men came knocking at the door asking for payment. Amina had never known about some of those loans. She sold her jewelry first, then small furniture, then pieces of land that had belonged to Kamal's family. Still, it was not enough. Kamal's mother began to look at her differently. "You were the last person with him," she would say, her voice cold. Maybe he felt trapped. The words hurt more than hunger. At the market, whispers followed her. "That is the woman whose husband ran away. I heard he owed dangerous people. Maybe she pushed him too hard." Amina kept her head down. She worked harder than ever. She woke before sunrise and returned home after dark. Her hands became rough from labor. Her back ached at night. But the loneliness hurt more than the exhaustion. Inside their small house, everything reminded her of him. His unfinished wooden chair remained in the corner. Dust gathered on it slowly. She could not bring herself to move it. Some nights she sat in front of it and cried. She spoke to him as if he were still there. "Why didn't you come back? Were you hurt? Did you think I wouldn't understand?" The first marriage proposal came 6 months after his disappearance. An older widower approached her family. "He is gone," people said. "You are still young." She refused immediately. "My husband is alive," she insisted. The second proposal came from a trader in the next village. He was wealthy. He promised security. She refused again. Years passed slowly. The second year felt heavier than the first. Hope was no longer bright. It was stubborn, fragile. Some days she felt strong. Other days she broke. Once, during a heavy rainstorm, the roof began to leak badly. Water poured into the house. She tried to fix it alone, climbing onto the roof with shaking hands. She slipped and fell into the mud. As rain soaked her clothes, she burst into tears, not from pain but from exhaustion. "I can't do this alone," she cried into the storm. But she had no choice. The third year brought anger. She grew tired of defending him, tired of explaining, tired of waiting. Late at night, doubt became louder. If he loved me, wouldn't he have found a way? If he were alive, wouldn't he send a message? Was I not enough to come back for? These thoughts filled her with guilt. Loving him felt like betrayal to herself. Letting go felt like betrayal to him. She felt trapped between two painful possibilities. By the fourth year, even Kamal's family stopped speaking of him as if he would return. They divided his remaining belongings. They discussed property matters without including her. One afternoon, village elders came to speak with her gently. "It has been long enough," they said. "Legally, he can be declared missing." The words felt like a final blow. Missing. Not dead. Not alive. Just missing. Suspended between worlds. She went home that day and took down their wedding photo from the wall. The colors had faded. Their smiles looked young and foolish. She held the photo close to her chest and whispered, "Where are you?" The fifth year brought something unexpected. Silence. Not the heavy silence of grief, but a tired acceptance. She no longer left the door open at night. She no longer lit a lamp for him. The unfinished wooden chair remained untouched, but she stopped staring at it. She began to understand something painful. Even if he were alive, he had chosen silence. And silence is also a choice. Still, pressure grew around her. "You cannot live like this forever," neighbors said. "You are wasting your life. You are neither wife nor widow." Those words hurt deeply. Who was she? A married woman? An abandoned one? A widow without a body to bury? One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Amina sat alone outside her house. Children ran past her laughing. Women carried baskets home. Life moved forward. But she felt stuck in time. She closed her eyes and imagined him walking toward her again. For a brief second, she allowed herself to hope. When she opened her eyes, the road was empty. 5 years. 5 long years of waiting. 5 years of defending a man who had left her with nothing but questions. That night, for the first time, she whispered words she had been afraid to say. "If you are alive, why didn't you come back?" Tears rolled down her face quietly. And deep inside her heart, something shifted. Not love. Not hate. But the painful understanding that survival sometimes requires letting go of ghosts. Yet even as she tried to breathe without him, she did not know that her past was not finished with her. It was only waiting for the right moment to return. By the beginning of the 6th year, Amina no longer counted the days. She counted tasks instead. How many baskets she sold. How many coins she saved. How many hours she could work without breaking down. Life had become something to survive, not something to feel. That was when Daniel began to appear more often. He owned a small grain store near the market. He was not loud like other men. He did not stare at her with pity or gossip behind her back. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady. The first time he helped her, it was small. She was struggling to carry 2 heavy sacks of rice. Without saying much, Daniel lifted one from her shoulder and carried it to her stall. "Thank you," she said, careful not to encourage conversation. He simply nodded. Days later, he repaired a broken wooden leg on her table without charging her. Then one afternoon, when rain suddenly poured from the sky, he stood beside her stall and held a cloth over her goods so they would not be ruined. He never asked for anything. He never brought up her past. But everyone knew he was watching her with quiet care. The village began whispering again. "This one is different. He is patient. He would make a good husband." Amina ignored the talk at first. She had built walls around her heart. Strong ones. One evening, Daniel approached her after closing time. "I know people talk," he said gently. "I am not here to replace anyone." Her chest tightened. "I am still married," she replied quickly. Daniel did not argue. "I know," he said. "But I also know you have been alone for a long time." Those words stayed with her. Alone. She had grown used to the loneliness. It had become part of her identity, like a shadow that followed her everywhere. But Daniel did not treat her like a broken woman. He treated her like someone worth waiting for. Months passed. Sometimes they walked home from the market together. Their conversations were simple, about crops, about village news, about life. He never asked her painful questions. But one evening, as they passed the river where she once stood with Kamal, Daniel stopped. "You deserve peace," he said quietly. The words hit her harder than she expected. When was the last time she felt that? That night, she lay awake thinking. Was it betrayal to consider happiness? Was it wrong to feel warmth when another man spoke kindly to her? She felt guilt, sharp and sudden. What if Kamal returned tomorrow? What if he walked through the door and found her heart moving on? But another voice inside her whispered something she had been afraid to admit. 5 years. 5 years without a word. If he were alive, wouldn't he have tried? The next proposal came from Daniel's family. It was respectful, formal, thoughtful. Her own family encouraged her. "You have waited long enough. Life does not pause forever." She resisted at first. She avoided Daniel for days. Her mind was a battlefield. One side shouted loyalty. The other begged for relief. Then one afternoon she watched a young mother in the market laughing with her child. The simple joy in that moment pierced her deeply. She realized something painful. She had stopped dreaming. She had stopped allowing herself to imagine a future. She was only surviving. That evening she visited Kamal's unfinished wooden chair. It was still in the corner of the house, covered in dust. She ran her fingers over it slowly. "I waited," she whispered. Her voice did not shake this time. "I waited as long as I could." There was no lightning, no sign from heaven, no sudden answer, only silence. And in that silence she made a decision. The next day when Daniel approached her, she did not step back. "I am afraid," she admitted softly. Daniel nodded. "So am I. I don't know if my heart is ready. I will not rush you." His patience felt like a balm on an old wound. Weeks later, under the shade of a large mango tree, Daniel formally asked for her hand. He did not promise wealth. He did not promise grand dreams. He promised presence. "I will stay," he said simply. Those 2 words carried more weight than she expected. She searched his face for doubt, for hidden ambition, for restlessness. She found none. Only steadiness. And for the first time in years, her heart did not feel heavy. It felt cautious, but hopeful. She said yes. The engagement announcement spread quickly through the village. Some celebrated. Some questioned. But Amina felt something new growing inside her. Not wild passion. Not overwhelming love. But something quieter. The feeling of breathing without pain. As preparations began for the wedding, she told herself she was ready. Ready to step into a future not built on waiting. Ready to choose life again. But deep in her heart, in a place she rarely visited, one small fear remained. What if the past was not done with her? She pushed the thought away. Some ghosts only live if you feed them. And she was finally learning to let go. The morning of Amina's second wedding arrived with soft golden light. The village woke earlier than usual. Women carried bowls of water and bundles of fabric. Children ran from house to house, laughing. The air felt warm and full of promise. Inside her room, Amina sat quietly while older women braided her hair. Their hands moved gently, weaving each strand with care. They sang soft songs about new beginnings and faithful husbands. "You look beautiful," one of them said. Amina smiled. She looked beautiful, but inside her chest something felt tight. Not fear exactly. Not regret. Just a strange unease. She pushed it down. This was a good day. A blessed day. Daniel had proven himself kind and steady. He had stood by her through whispers and judgment. He had never asked her to forget her past, only to walk forward. As the women dressed her in a fresh white gown, memories crept in. 5 years ago she had worn white for the first time. Her heart had raced with excitement. Kamal had stood waiting for her, smiling with pride. She remembered the drums, the laughter, the way he squeezed her hand during the ceremony. She blinked quickly and forced the image away. That life had ended long ago. Today was different. Today was calmer, safer. Outside, music began to rise. Drums beat in steady rhythm. Guests filled the courtyard. Colorful fabrics moved like waves in the sunlight. Daniel stood at the front, wearing a simple but clean suit. His posture was straight, his expression calm. There was no nervous excitement in him, only quiet certainty. When Amina stepped outside, a soft cheer rose from the crowd. She walked slowly, carefully, her heart beating louder with each step. The ceremony began. Elders offered prayers. Families sat proudly. The sun shone brightly above them. Amina looked at Daniel. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. For a moment, peace settled over her. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Maybe love did not have to be loud to be real. The elder began to speak the final blessings. The moment for vows was close. And that was when it happened. Amina's eyes drifted across the crowd. It was a simple glance. A habit. She wanted to see the faces of the people who had supported her. But her gaze froze. Near the back of the courtyard, partially hidden behind a tall tree, stood a man. He was thinner than she remembered. His beard was rough and uneven. His clothes looked worn. His face carried lines that had not been there before. But his eyes, those eyes had not changed. Dark, familiar, unmistakable. Kamal. Her breath caught in her throat. The world around her seemed to slow down. The drums faded into distant echoes. The voices became muffled. The sunlight felt suddenly too bright. Her fingers went cold. No, it couldn't be. She blinked once, twice. He was still there, alive, watching her. Her knees weakened. 5 years of tears. 5 years of waiting. 5 years of unanswered questions, standing in front of her like a living shadow. A soft gasp escaped her lips. Daniel noticed. He followed her gaze. Confusion crossed his face. The crowd began to murmur. People turned their heads, trying to see what had caught her attention. Kamal did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood there, as if unsure whether he belonged in the world he had walked back into. Amina's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Relief crashed into her first. He was alive. Not dead. Not gone forever. Alive. Then came anger. Where had he been? Why now? Why today? Her chest tightened with a mix of emotions so strong she could barely breathe. Daniel reached for her hand. "Amina?" he asked softly. She could not answer. Her eyes remained locked on the man she had once called husband. The man she had defended. The man she had waited for until hope nearly destroyed her. Kamal took one small step forward. Gasps spread through the guests like wildfire. Someone whispered his name. Another voice said, "It's him?" The music stopped completely. Silence fell over the courtyard. Amina felt the ground shift beneath her. Was she dreaming? Was this punishment? Or was fate simply cruel? Kamal's eyes filled with something she could not read. Regret. Fear. Desperation. But it was too late for silent expressions. 5 years too late. Her body swayed. For a second she thought she might faint. Daniel tightened his grip, steadying her. The elder looked confused, unsure whether to continue or stop. But the ceremony had already shattered. Amina finally forced herself to breathe. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Kamal? The name felt strange on her lips, like a memory pulled from another lifetime. The man nodded slowly. And in that single movement, everything she thought she had rebuilt began to tremble. Her past had not disappeared. It had returned. On the very day she chose to move on. And as the entire village watched in stunned silence, Amina realized something terrifying. This wedding was no longer about love. It was about truth. And truth had just walked back into her life. The courtyard was no longer filled with music. It was filled with whispers. Daniel stepped back slowly, giving Amina space. The elders exchanged uneasy looks. Kamal stood near the tree as if unsure whether he had the right to move closer. Amina's hands trembled. "Stop the ceremony," one of the elders said quietly. The words felt heavy. Amina turned to her father. His face was pale but firm. "We must hear him," he said. Kamal was led inside the house. Amina followed, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The door closed behind them. For a moment they stood in silence. 5 years of silence. Now they were face to face. Kamal looked older, harder. His shoulders were no longer as straight as she remembered. His eyes carried exhaustion. "You're alive," Amina finally said. Her voice cracked. "Yes," he answered softly. Just that one word. Alive. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Where were you?" she demanded. Kamal lowered his gaze. He began slowly as if each word weighed too much. Before he disappeared he had borrowed money. Not small amounts, large sums. He had believed one big investment would change everything. He wanted to surprise her, to prove himself. But the people he borrowed from were not ordinary lenders. They were dangerous men, he admitted. When he failed to repay on time they threatened him. And worse, they threatened her. "They said they knew where you lived," he whispered. Amina's stomach twisted. He said he left that night to meet them, hoping to negotiate, hoping to buy time. Instead they took him. "They said I would work until the debt was cleared." He described being taken far away, to another region, forced to work in a workshop under watch. No phone, no freedom, no way to send word home. Years passed. He tried to escape once and was beaten. He tried again and failed. Each time he thought of her. "I wanted to come back," he said, his voice breaking. "But I had nothing. No money. No power." "Why no message?" Amina asked, her voice rising. "Not even one letter?" He swallowed hard. "When I finally escaped, I was ashamed." Ashamed. The word echoed in the small room. He said he returned to the village months ago. But he did not come to her door. "I saw you in the market," he confessed. "You looked strong, independent. I felt like a ghost." He had watched from a distance. Watched her struggle. Watched her survive without him. "I thought you deserved better," he said. Amina felt anger rise like fire in her chest. "Better?" she repeated. "Better than knowing the truth?" He looked at her helplessly. "I failed you. I didn't want to return as a broken man." "And today?" she asked sharply. "Why today?" He closed his eyes. "I heard you were getting married." The words hung between them. "I couldn't let you belong to someone else," he said. "Not without trying." There it was. Not protection. Not sacrifice. Pride. Fear of losing her completely. Relief battled with rage inside her. He had suffered. He had been trapped. But he had also chosen silence. For months, while she rebuilt her life. "You let me believe you were dead," she whispered. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "You let me beg God for a sign." Kamal stepped forward slightly, but she stepped back. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "From what?" she snapped. "The truth." Silence filled the room again. He looked smaller now. Less like the confident man she married. More like someone crushed by his own choices. "I love you," he said quietly. The words no longer felt simple. Love had once been enough. But 5 years had changed everything. Amina's heart ached in ways she could not describe. She was relieved he was alive. She was furious he had stayed away. She was hurt that he returned only when she was moving on. "You had 5 years," she said softly. 5 years to come back to me." He had no answer. Outside, voices grew louder. The village wanted to know what would happen next. Her second wedding dress suddenly felt heavy. Everything she had built since his disappearance now stood at risk. Her dignity, her peace, her future. Kamal looked at her with desperate hope. "Come back to me," he said. But she was no longer the girl who waited by an open door. She was a woman who survived 5 years of silence. And now she had to decide what his return truly meant. Not just for him, but for herself. When Amina stepped back outside, the courtyard felt like a storm waiting to break. The music had stopped completely. The drums lay silent on the ground. Guests stood in small groups, whispering urgently. Some craned their necks to see her face. Others stared openly at Kamal, who followed a few steps behind her. The news had already spread. "He's alive. The first husband. He came back on the wedding day." The words moved through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Daniel stood near the center of the courtyard, still in his wedding suit. His jaw was tight, but his posture remained calm. He did not shout. He did not demand answers. He simply waited. That made the situation even heavier. Amina felt dozens of eyes on her. She felt exposed, like her private pain had been placed on display for everyone to judge. Kamal's mother pushed forward through the crowd. The moment she saw her son clearly, she let out a cry and rushed toward him. "My son," she sobbed, holding his face in her hands. "You're alive." Tears flowed freely now. Some people wept with joy. Others looked angry. One elder raised his voice. "This marriage cannot continue until this matter is settled." Another man argued back. "He disappeared for 5 years. She has the right to move on." Voices clashed. "She is still his wife. He abandoned her. Maybe he had reasons." Reasons don't erase 5 years. The courtyard turned into a courtroom without a judge. Amina's father stepped forward, trying to calm the crowd. "Silence," he shouted. But silence did not come easily. Women whispered behind their hands. What will she do? Does she go back to him? Is she even free to choose? The questions felt sharp, like stones being thrown at her heart. Daniel finally stepped closer to Amina. He did not touch her. He did not claim her. He simply stood beside her. "I will respect whatever decision you make," he said quietly. His voice did not carry anger, only pain. That hurt her more. Kamal stood a few feet away, watching everything unravel. His face showed regret, but also fear. Fear that he might lose her forever. An elder turned to Amina. "You must speak," he said firmly. "The village cannot decide this for you." The entire courtyard fell into tense silence. The air felt thick. Amina looked around slowly. She saw judgment. She saw curiosity. She saw sympathy. But very few saw her as a woman caught between past and present. To some, she was property. To others, she was scandal. Her wedding dress felt heavier by the second. 5 years ago, she had been the young bride full of dreams. Today, she stood as a woman tested by absence and survival. "This is not a small matter," another elder said. "If he is alive, their marriage still stands." Murmurs of agreement spread through part of the crowd. But others shook their heads. He left her with nothing. She suffered. She rebuilt her life. The arguments grew louder again. Amina felt her chest tighten. This was no longer just about love. It was about honor, tradition, reputation. If she returned to Kamal, some would call it loyalty. If she stayed with Daniel, others would call it betrayal. No matter what she chose, someone would judge her. The ceremony decorations fluttered in the wind, forgotten. The food prepared for celebration sat untouched. Daniel's family stood quietly, embarrassed but dignified. Kamal's family stood protective and hopeful. 2 futures waited in front of her. And the village demanded an answer. The elder spoke again, more gently this time. "Amina, this ceremony cannot continue until you decide." The words felt final. The drums would not play again until she spoke. The wedding could not move forward. Everything had paused. Amina realized something deeply painful. For 5 years she had lived in uncertainty. Now, in one single afternoon, uncertainty had returned, but louder and more public than ever. She took a slow breath. This decision would not just change her life. It would define her. And as the crowd held its breath, waiting for her next move, Amina understood that for the first time in years, the choice was finally hers. Amina retreated to the small room inside the house, closing the door behind her. Outside, the murmurs of the village grew distant, but inside, her heart was louder than ever. She sank onto a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and let herself think. 5 years. 5 long years of waiting, of hoping, of surviving. All of it had been for a man who vanished without a word. And now he was here, alive, standing before her, expecting forgiveness or perhaps even love. She closed her eyes and allowed the memories to flood her mind. She saw Kamal smile the day they first met at the market. The way he had held her hand, his gentle touch making her feel like she was the only person in the world. The late nights when they dreamed together beneath the stars, speaking of a future full of hope. She remembered the warmth of their early days, the shared laughter, and the promise of forever. And then came the pain. The empty doorway. The silence. The rumors that whispered in the village that threatened to bury her alive. The nights she cried alone, pressing her face into his pillow, imagining the sound of his voice that never came. The endless uncertainty. The gnawing fear that perhaps he had chosen to abandon her. She opened her eyes and looked at Kamal. His face was pale, tired, and full of shame. He had suffered, she knew that. He had survived horrors that would have broken any man. But he had left her behind, leaving her to carry the weight of his absence alone. Then she turned to Daniel. Calm, steady, patient. The man who had walked beside her gently, never rushing, never demanding. He had watched her grief without judgment, offering comfort when she allowed it. He had respected her, valued her presence, and waited. His love was quiet, but it was real, reliable, safe. Her heart ached as she realized the true nature of her conflict. It was not between two men. It was between her past and her self-respect. Between love that had vanished and a love that had patiently waited. She stood and walked to the window, looking at the village beyond. The whispers, the judgment, the excitement, all of it felt suffocating. She thought of herself 5 years ago, innocent and hopeful, waiting for a man who never came. And she thought of the woman she had become, strong, independent, and painfully aware of her worth. Could she forgive Kamal? Could she embrace him again? Could she risk everything she had built, knowing the possibility that he might vanish again? And what of Daniel? He had given her peace, patience, and presence. His love had been consistent, like the gentle flow of the river they often passed together. But could she truly open her heart to someone new when a shadow from her past loomed so heavily over her? Tears fell slowly and she pressed her hand to her chest. I loved him, she whispered to herself. I waited for him. But he left. And leaving is a choice too. She turned toward Daniel, who looked at her with quiet hope. I see now, she said softly, that love is not just about passion. It is about presence, and truth, and respect. Then she looked at Kamal, her voice firmer this time. You chose silence. You left me with nothing. 5 years without you. I survived. But I will not survive being left behind again. For a moment the room was still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Amina understood that her decision would not please everyone. Some would call her heartless. Others would call her wise. But she had finally reclaimed her agency. She would not let her past dictate her worth. The choice was no longer just about love. It was about dignity, about self-respect, about the woman she had fought so hard to become. And in that realization, Amina felt something she had not felt in years: power. She was no longer just a woman waiting for someone to return. She was a woman standing firmly in her truth. And now she had to choose, not between two men but between her past and her life. The courtyard waited. The village held its breath. Guests shifted nervously, unsure whether to cheer, cry, or turn away. But Amina no longer heard them. She only heard herself, her heartbeat, steady but strong, reminding her that she was no longer a girl swept along by circumstance. She was a woman in control of her life. She turned slowly to Kamal. His eyes were pleading, full of hope and fear, a mirror of the pain he had caused and endured. Amina, he began, voice breaking. Please, let me explain. Let me. She shook her head gently but firmly. No, Kamal. I've listened. I've understood. I feel your pain. But I cannot risk my life, my heart, my dignity again. You left me once. You chose silence. That choice changed everything. He swallowed hard. He had prepared for this, or so he thought, but hearing the finality in her words crushed him. But I love you, he whispered. I never stopped. I know, she said softly, cutting through his desperation. But love without presence is empty. 5 years of waiting taught me that. I survived without you. I thrived without you. And I will not allow myself to be abandoned again, no matter how much I loved you. Kamal's face crumpled. Anger, sorrow, and regret mingled in his features. He had expected resistance, hesitation, but not this unwavering resolve. Then she turned to Daniel. His hand hovered near hers, uncertain if he should step forward. But he did not speak. He only waited, patient as always. I choose you, she said clearly, without hesitation. Not because I forgot the past, but because I have learned what love must be. Present, honest, steady. You gave me that, Daniel. You have shown me I am worthy of care, respect, and a life without fear. Daniel's eyes softened. Relief, joy, and love shone all at once. He stepped forward slowly and took her hand in his. The crowd exhaled collectively, though some faces betrayed shock and others disbelief. Kamal stood frozen. His shoulders slumped and tears ran silently down his face. 5 years of longing, suffering, and regret, all for a love that would not return in the way he had imagined. I understand, he said quietly, almost to himself. I wanted to protect you. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I see now. I failed. Amina nodded, her voice steady but gentle. You did fail, Kamal. But I survived. And I will continue to live fully. I cannot undo the past, but I can decide my future. The elders, still tense, slowly lowered their voices. The villagers murmured, some approving, some judging, but Amina no longer cared. The wedding could finally continue. Daniel squeezed her hand, a silent promise of love and presence. Amina looked at him and allowed herself to smile. Not the naive smile of a girl in love, but the radiant smile of a woman who had fought for her dignity and chosen wisely. Kamal turned slowly, avoiding the crowd's eyes. He walked toward the back of the courtyard, a shadow of what he had once been in her life. He had returned, but he would leave again, this time with understanding and acceptance. And as Amina lifted her gaze to the sky, the weight of the past 5 years began to ease, replaced by a strange, exhilarating lightness. She had made her choice, not for vengeance, not for passion, but for herself. The drums started again, hesitantly at first, then more boldly. Guests clapped. Smiles returned to faces. And as Daniel led her forward to resume the ceremony, Amina knew something profound. She had survived loss. She had survived heartbreak. And now she was finally free to embrace life on her own terms. This was not just the beginning of a marriage. It was the rebirth of a woman who had endured, fought, and ultimately chosen herself and her future. 5 years had passed since that unforgettable day in the courtyard. The memory of Kamal's sudden return had faded into a story she rarely told aloud, a shadow of the past that no longer controlled her. Amina stood in the small garden behind her home, the sun warming her face as children ran and laughed nearby. Daniel helped her tend to the vegetables, his hands gentle and steady. The house was modest, but it was theirs, a life built on trust, care, and shared effort. Every corner carried small signs of their years together. A wooden swing, pots lined neatly, the soft hum of a simple, happy life. She thought of herself 5 years ago, the young woman who waited by the doorway, heart heavy with uncertainty, hoping for a man who had disappeared. She remembered the ache of unanswered questions, the nights of silent tears, and the weight of whispers in the village. She had survived it all. Not because someone returned for her, but because she chose to keep living, keep loving, keep breathing even when the world seemed unfair. Daniel glanced at her, smiling as he wiped dirt from his hands. Dinner's ready, he said. There was no urgency, no tension, only the calm certainty of a life they had built together. Amina smiled back. She felt gratitude not only for the life she had now, but for the lessons that pain had forced her to learn. Love was not just passion, nor was it only loyalty. Love required presence, honesty, and the courage to act with respect, for oneself and for another. She had forgiven Kamal, not for him but for herself. She had learned that forgiveness does not erase pain. It simply frees the one who has carried it for too long. Sometimes, absence teaches the meaning of staying, of choosing wisely, and of holding on not to what disappears, but to what remains. Kamal had rebuilt his own life somewhere far away, quietly. She had heard whispers of him, alive but living in solitude, carrying his own regrets. She did not resent him. He had returned too late, and in that, he had taught her the most important lesson, that survival is not about waiting for someone else to come back. It is about choosing to stand tall, regardless of who disappears. As Amina walked through the garden, the sun casting long golden shadows over the ground, she felt a peace she had never known before. Her heart was full, not of fear or longing, but of quiet joy. She had chosen life, love, and herself, and nothing could take that away. She paused at the doorway, glancing back at the home she had built. Her eyes lingered on the wooden chair that had once belonged to Kamal. Dusty and worn, it remained a silent witness to the years she had endured. She smiled faintly, touched its surface, and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how to stay, even when the ones we love disappear." And with that, Amina turned fully toward the future, stepping into a life defined not by absence or loss, but by resilience, wisdom, and the enduring truth that sometimes, the most powerful love story is the one we write for ourselves. The wind rustled softly through the garden, carrying with it a sense of quiet triumph. Amina breathed in deeply, feeling the sun, the earth, and the life around her. She had chosen wisely. She had survived. And for the first time in a lifetime she felt completely free.